Okay, and welcome to episode number 16 of Shockwaves. I'm your host, Rob Galluzzo. I am sitting here with Mr. Elric Kane.
We're back.
We're back.
And we are deeper than ever.
Deeper where?
In the end.
In the deep end?
Of horror.
Deep end of horror.
We're in the deepest end of horror.
The deepest end.
I listened to that.
I passed Wiederhorn on the way here.
No, you didn't.
Does he live in LA?
I think he's retired in Florida.
Oh, okay.
We'll find him one
like
day.
Yeah.
Also with us is Rebekah McKendry.
What up, guys?
Editor-in-Chief of Blumhouse.com and our head of development at the Blumhouse Productions side of things.
Hi.
Ryan Turek.
Hello.
Welcome, man.
Thanks for having me
And
back.
just, I'm very excited because I think it was a couple days ago, Waxworks Records, one of their subscription titles, and one of their records they're putting out is the soundtrack to Shockwaves.
Yes.
Oh, boom.
So, boom, I got all excited. I was like,
Maybe we'll get a whole bunch free. We'll start signing it.
Yeah, we'll sign those at
No
conventions.
copyright
from here
infringement.
out.
We will, yes, we will sign those soundtracks.
Before we jump into our things, it was the master, Dario Argento's 76th birthday.
Right?
Happy birthday, Mr. Argento.
And I was looking at that run of films he had from Deep Red to basically opera, and it's so freaking strong. It's probably second to only Carpenter in terms of a run of films. I just wanted to ask quickly to jump off the bat, your favorite, not best, because I always think, Tenebrae is the best, but it's not my favorite. What do you think? What's your favorite Argento? Just to get the ball.
It changes all the time because we did this in the first episode.
Yeah.
Well, not with Ryan.
But not with Ryan. Yeah, what's your favorite Argento?
Tenebrae.
Tenebrae,
followed by Suspiria, followed by Opera.
Okay.
Ooh,
what about you?
Good one. Last time I think I said Deep Red. I think I'm still Deep Red. And then it would be Tenebrae. And I really love Phenomena just because it's such a crazy, weird movie. And Donald Pleasance. So those are mine.
That is pretty fun. Yeah,
Suspiria by far.
Okay. Yeah. And so I don't know, Sleepless or The Card Player.
Well, I'm going to go home and watch Dracula 3D.
I got to be honest. I don't hate The Card Player.
No. Look, they're all shot well.
It's
they're just
fun.
not. They've lost something.
Yeah.
I think I'm still
like
Suspiria. Yeah, do you like it?
I like Stendhal.
Yeah, Stendel's got some. No, Stendel's actually got some really interesting stuff. I'm going to go Suspiria, but you know what? Inferno is really like
bonkers
because it's pure cinema. It really, I mean, the purest of all his films. It's the movie that you're like, there's no narrative, there's no character. It's
a good
just
chunk
stuff
of which
out
he
there.
didn't really direct, though.
Oh well,
which is revealed on the Blu-ray that I worked on.
Mario Bava did the last.
Lamberto Bava did all the underground water stuff with Irene Miracle because Dario just stopped talking to her. You know what? If you don't have the Blue Underground release, there's some fun stuff on there.
Yeah, and that was the one where he was
candid.
shooting something at the same time as Lustig, right? And they would meet up in a park. There's some story that they're all hanging out.
Who, Argento?
It might have been that one, yeah.
It always warms my heart when I hear stories about Argento kind of bleeding into American cinema, like the filmmakers, when he paired up with like Romero and Dawn of the Dead and stuff. Always it just warmed my heart that there was an era in which he was
respected.
He was respected
by other peers who were making horror films. They were like, and to think he wrote Once Upon a Time in the West. That's pretty fucking.
It's it's kind of like when Takeshi Miike was embraced.
Yeah, Takeshi. I'm going to be talking about him in a minute.
And not to get too far off track, but since you brought up Argento, I know there's he just did a 4K restoration of Dawn of the Dead or Zombie, his version.
Oh,
that's premiering. Where's it premiering, Ryan? Do you know?
Venice.
Venice, I think. Yes. Now here's the thing: the rights to the U.S. and overseas are completely different. Yeah. So just because there's a 4K restoration of the European cut Zombie doesn't mean we're going to get it here. Yeah. I don't know.
You could get an import of that, right?
I don't know. There's no release. There's just the screening. There's no release info and details. Last I heard, what's his name? Richard.
Guys Martin and everything.
Rothenstein. Yeah, he was doing a 3D conversion of Dawn of the Dead.
Which has been going on for the last 10 years. Yeah.
So who knows? But maybe we'll get to see a proper 4K restoration of Dawn of the Dead. I mean, right now it's just the European cut. So we'll see what happens.
Here's the Dario, and don't forget about these guys. Just if you don't like their last movies, don't forget the amazing work they gave you in the middle of their careers.
I agree with that.
That's incredible stuff.
That might even come back later.
Yeah.
All right, Bekah, what did you see this week?
I'll start with one that Elric needs to see because he will like this. From 1980, I saw Harlequin.
I've heard of it.
And this was released recently on Blu-ray by Scorpion Releasing. And it is pretty much like a Rasputin story about this guy there's this senator and his son has cancer or leukemia or something like that. And this weird guy shows up and claims to be a faith healer, but he kind of takes control of the family. It's weird. It's like totally weird. And the main character, the faith healer, was originally written for David Bowie and not played by David Bowie in the film. But yeah, you will like it, Elric.
Is it by one of the guys of The Who in it?
I don't know.
Curly hair, the main guy?
I don't remember.
In my
that.
brain, it feels like that.
I don't think Roger Daltrey's in it. I would have noticed that.
He's in a few movies.
But yeah, so you will like that one.
Last time she said that, it was like a guy riding around a bike. It was the part of an episode that we lost. Remember that one? And I said, what do you think, I'm Chris Alexander? And that joke never saw the light of day.
It did.
Till now.
Till now.
It's the same director as Snapshot or The Day After Halloween. It's an Australian film. I swear we've had a conversation about this film before. Never mind. And then the other one that I saw, which doesn't seem like horror, but it becomes horror in the movie, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which Criterion just put out this absolutely gorgeous Blu-ray of. The movie is just batshit. And awesome, I mean, it's exactly what you think it is. It's a massive Hollywood movie that they hire Russ Meyer, the king of exploitation, to do the sequel for. And so
who co-wrote it? Roger Ebert.
Thank you.
And he apparently wore a diaper a lot of the time, like to be spanked. Like you. Some of the stories. Oh, yeah.
So copious amounts of drugs and just weirdness and sex and free love and rock and roll. The movie's awesome. And then in the last third, it becomes kind of a horror movie, which is really cool.
A lot of his films had all sorts of crazy, weird genre twists.
Yeah.
Like, you think about Faster Pussycat.
Yeah.
A lot of big twists. Big twists.
And Mondo Topless. I mean, it was like total twist.
Actually, Bekah, a personal request, because I'm not getting off this kind of idea right now. Roger Daltrey in horror films. Can you please do a Blumhouse.com top 10? Because I can't get out of my mind that Roger Daltrey was in Vampirella.
Oh, that's right.
That is right.
And I saw another trailer recently with him.
Completely tangential conversation.
Oh, was he in that one with the cat and the guy with the mustache that you loved? He was your spirit animal at one point? You remember
my spirit animal?
Yeah. One time you posted Sam Elliott. What's that, Sam? The Legacy. I think Roger Daltrey's in that.
Oh, yeah.
I think Daltrey's in one scene of that.
Yeah. He totally is.
All right, so guys, we're going to need a Roger Daltrey retrospective.
All right, in the works. What about you, Ron? You see anything this week?
I kicked back and watched The Mummy, the old Universal. Yeah, the original Mummy. I spent the weekend kind of just. I was in New York, so I saw a viewing of Morgan, which it is what it is. You know,
Is there? I'll only ask you this: is there more than what the trailer shows? Like, are there any other hints or surprises?
Yes, and you guess it in the first minute of the movie.
Oh, okay.
That was. I mean, it's. I love the kind of concept of AI and and turning a horror spin on it. But honestly, I mean. It didn't register with me, and I was kind of bummed out.
And look at Sexiest Species.
Huh?
Not a sexiest species.
Not a sexiest species, correct. And then, I rewatched The Mummy. I kind of got in the Halloween spirit of things on Labor Day weekend. And
are you a fan of that original Mummy?
Well, this is funny because I think on the Bloodcast, and David Scow kind of sides with me on this, I believe. But the original Mummy does not work.
I agree.
It is a very laborious film.
Oh, the original, yeah. It's shot really well, and he looks great. But
there's some of the makeup. The first, once you get beyond the first 5 minutes, the first 5 minutes, when he's actually resurrected, he grabs the manuscript, and he kind of walks off, and the guy loses his mind. After that, it's all kind of downhill. And I thought this time, watching it, just because my girlfriend and I are kind of going through all the Universal Classic Movie Monsters over from between now and Halloween. And, I thought I would like being completely attentive to the cinema of it, being completely attentive to the storytelling of it. And I'm like, no, there's a sort of malaise to it, I'm just like,
and what's crazy about that is I think it's like 76 minutes, and it feels long.
It feels
I remember
like
that. Yeah,
it feels like 95 minutes, but it's really a short movie. And I think it's just because there's not a whole lot of meat on its bones. It's a movie about a curse, a mummy who comes back. They cut to 10 years later, and it's Boris Karloff kind of doing his thing. And guiding these scientists onto another kind of gravesite, and then trying to resurrect his girlfriend. And it's like, dude, that's it. There's no more substance to it. And it kind of, when you look back at the Universal Classic Movie Monsters, I I respect Dracula and I respect The Mummy, but they're not my favorites.
Yeah,
I agree with that one.
And even as films, you know, what Todd Browning did with Dracula, again, there's a rhythm to it that is not my speed.
And the Spanish one's better, and they were filmed on the same sets. The Spanish one moves a little better.
Yeah. So I'm gonna. So you know, look, I've only started on The Mummy. I love all the classic movie monsters. Yeah. It's what it's the kind of food that I was raised on growing up as a horror fan. But I still stand by it. Like this, fifth viewing of The Mummy that I've given it, and I'm like, no, I'm out. I can't do it. And if I remember, they get really schlocky from here on out. You know,
I don't remember.
See, but that's what I remember. My interpretation of The Mummy or memory of it is actually the sequels. You know, the guy in the bandages that's running around whereas you don't really get that version of it because it's Karloff in the first one.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Of those classics, you're totally right because I try to revisit them almost every year. One year I just went sequel. I was like, you know what?
Oh,
because
really? Yeah.
What I love about the Universal Monster sequels, and it's worth saying because I think it's next Tuesday. I think it's the 13th. I already pre-ordered them. They're doing Blu-ray box sets of Frankenstein. It's next week. Frankenstein and Wolfman are the first two. Jesus. And it's cool, but there's a problem with it. Whereas the DVDs were the legacy collections. Each one had about 5 films each. And if you bought them all, you can consecutively go. Right now, they're only doing Frankenstein and the Wolfman, and it includes all the Frankenstein movies and all the Wolfman movies, but there's crossover. So, they both have Frankenstein meets the Wolfman.
Right. That's what that big box set that came out that Universal put out.
But they didn't cross over.
They did. I looked at it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they did cross over because I was looking at the Wolfman and I was like, oh, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman's on here. Then I looked at the Frankenstein collection. I was like, oh, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman's here.
So they're doing that where there's a lot of bleed over. But, I got to give it up for Universal because, again, a few years ago I went through the sequels. And what I loved about it, and you could go on the Wikipedia or whatever, is they literally, you could watch them all consecutively. Yeah. They literally picked up wherever, they're they fell off a cliff fighting in the next movie, whatever it is, like House of Dracula, whatever, is, somebody finds their frozen bodies.
Well, Frankenstein was exhumed and he's still covered in the kind of clay that he fell into.
Yeah, so props to continuity.
Well, that's the thing. It's the funny thing that cracks me up is that fans now will go, "Oh my God, shared universe, classic movie monsters."
But they already did it, yeah.
Yo, they did that.
Yeah,
they did that. They legit House of Dracula. House
Brought
of
them all
Frankenstein.
Together, yeah.
Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
What's Tom Cruise doing now? It's something.
He's doing The Mummy,
and we don't really know what it's going to be. Though.
So the girl, it's a kind of contemporary story. Set in the Middle East.
Okay.
And the one
action like the last version.
I don't know, but I heard it's really scary. They're actually going for scares.
Good.
The Mummy is played by a woman who Sophia something. Oh, she was in Kingsman. She was the girl with the
razor legs.
With the razor legs, and she plays the Mummy.
I think she's in Star Trek Beyond. She's
the
woman that's with all
she's
the
in
makeup.
Star Trek Beyond. Yeah, she's a great actress.
And now, will that be part of the universe that they're trying to rebuild?
The universe is the Dracula Untold is not part of the universe.
Right? Yeah, I knew that. Yeah,
it begins with the Mummy.
Why not?
Okay. Yeah. So I wonder who gets Creature because that's still been the coveted prize. For so many filmmakers, how many have done it? Tried. Joe Dante had
Carpenter,
Landis,
Del Toro with Scow.
I wonder who was the closest. Maybe Dante, because I knew they had actually shot stuff.
I think Breck
Eisner. Yeah,
Breck Eisner.
He's the most recent.
Eisner was the most recent and pretty close.
It's I would look at Guillermo and think that's a no-brainer.
Right.
I think Guillermo could deliver something special there.
But you never know. So anyway, well, cool. Anything else? Mummy?
That was it. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna dive into a bunch of stuff this weekend. I want to kind of catch up on the classics. It's now, once September is kind of rolled in, it's okay. I usually use September and October to kind of revisit the classics, whether it's Universal Classic Movie Monsters or the Hammer titles, or I always say this. It's guys. Horror movies were long before 1970. I hear a lot of people say 1980, but 1970 is usually the kind of watermark, and it's no. There's a lot of great stuff before that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what about you, Elric?
Well, I'll talk about one film that I doubt anyone here will disagree on, the glory of the new Rob Zombie film, 31, because I'm pretty sure we'll all be uniform on that.
Because I saw it.
I saw it, yeah, and I know
we have a lot to talk about.
I know Ryan's seen it.
I saw this on Sundance.
Yeah, so everyone's going to be on the same page here. I imagine we all just thought it was great.
Except our social media guy who's sitting next to me. Maybe he agrees. I don't know.
John, I'm in your corner, baby. I'll tell you what.
No, you're not.
Look,
we're gonna come to blows right now.
Here's my thing.
Wait. What?
Here's my thing.
What's your thing?
Turek saw my tweet, and he wrote to me straight away.
What was your tweet? Because I don't pay attention to these things.
Yeah, I know you know. My tweet was just, look, there's a lot of mess here, but Richard Brake is so great.
All right, I'm
in
going to
the
give you
role
that.
of Doomhead. That his moments, and I'll go further. I swear to God, they're shot differently because I think the camera still, anytime he's on film and it's actually shot cinematically, everything else is so messy. All the action scenes are unbearable. The action scenes are the worst thing about the movie. So don't get me wrong. I'm not a lover, but what I will say is I was sitting there. I don't know if Dick liked it as much as that, but I had kind of a smirk on my face the whole time because I was like, you know what? As bad as parts of this is, he makes ugly films still, and no one's doing this. And he's still making that movie he loves. This one is, yes, I agree with the low-hanging fruit. He's making a fan film a little bit. The worst thing I'll say about it is it feels like it's his first film. And that's a problem when you're on your fifth film. This could have been a rookie first film, you know? But Doomhead is one of my favorite things of the year. I'm not even lying. Like that character. That character. Okay, let me put this up. There's a final scene in this movie which I thought was fucking rad.
All right, I'm waiting for you to finish. You done yet?
That's it.
All right, that's great.
That's it.
You know what? I love Rob as a personality. I like him as a musician. I love him in interviews. Like he's such a smart, articulate guy, and I love hearing him talk about everything from movies to music to whatever. However, this is 6 movies in now. As I left this one, I just have to come to terms with the fact that Rob Zombie movies are not for me. And this is after...
You didn't like Lords of Salem, right?
I didn't like Lords of Salem at all. I tried to watch it again last year. What's that?
You like Rejects.
Rejects I
like.
You
talked about Rejects.
I talked about House and Rejects last week, and I kind of like them, but even this movie made me second guess if I like them. Like, that's how...
Wow.
You know, but like you said, he makes mean movies, and this one to me felt like it belongs. It feels like a second movie. It feels like what he would have made in between House and Rejects.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like kind of early on. And I think the opening scene is fantastic with that actor you just mentioned, Richard Brake. Like the opening
He's a Game of Thrones guy, which I didn't realize at the time.
And he was also in Halloween.
He's in Halloween too, and he says the F word 800 times.
I felt
cow.
I felt like I'd never seen him before. And that was part of my excitement about it. I felt like, I've never seen this actor, and there's something about that.
First time I ever saw him, he was in Doom.
That Doom. Doomhead now.
Person.
Doomhead. Oh.
But you know what? What really, I don't know if it bothers me or I agree with it, but like obviously I saw it as part of this fandom event, and he did a Q&A at the end.
Yeah.
And I mean, everything is cute. Like, at whatever mixed feelings you have, he confirms in his Q&A. The first thing is, they're like, how did you come up with the movie? He's like, well, I was working on this other movie, and it was taking so long. I was on a phone call, and I was like, you know what? I bet I could fucking make something up right now on the spot, and I'll get that made before this. So that's how I came up with this movie.
Yeah, 4 minutes.
And you're like, oh my God. He's like, literally, I just threw this shit out of my head, and I was like, I bet I could get that made.
The thing that bothers me about that, however, is that he used fandom money.
Oh, crowdfunded it, yeah.
He crowdfunded the movie to get it made, you know, and it's like,
but don't you think it's going to hit those fans? They're going to like it?
Absolutely. Well, that's the demo, you know. But when you're so dismissive, like in that kind of creative space, it's like, dude, come on now. Now, listen, I mean, like my whole viewpoint with Rob, I mean, like I still listen to his music. I'm a fan. Sometimes I side with his views, sometimes I don't. You know, my favorite movie of his is still Devil's Rejects.
Yep.
You know, House of a Thousand Corpses I thought it was a great first. You know, it was funny. I was just listening to the last week's episode, Rob, before, and I completely agree with you in terms of when House of a Thousand Corpses came onto the scene. I think the reason why people responded to it the way they did, I mean, this was like 2003, is because we were in the midst of like the kind of J-horror remake kind of thing, and all of a sudden, someone came along and made a movie that confirmed for horror fans that horror that we grew up on wasn't dying. Like that we were seeing that kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre like ferocity and a kind of like throw everything out the window, who gives a fuck kind of violence.
Yeah.
And nobody was making that kind of movie, you know? So that's what we all kind of responded to. And it was kind of like it was a mixtape movie.
Well, I mean, and also, I mean, you know, because we grew up we were looking for these hard to find Italian movies, convention stuff. You know, this movie got thrown out by Universal and it got delayed by 2 years. So you're like, it's too horrifying to put out. Right. So the hype, because nothing was happening horror, and you're like, what's so intense about this movie that Universal's scared to put it out?
Yeah, well, there was
that built into it.
Yeah, there was that too. But I mean, with 31, man, I went into it with an open mind and I wanted a return to form. You know, I wanted that return to form, and I just feel like and these are completely my own thoughts on it, but I felt like Lords of Salem, which I appreciate and actually admire,
yeah, that's one of my favorites.
is I think that kind of scared him after doing Lords of Salem, and obviously I'm sure there's other factors about trying to get another movie made, and he's probably not thinking too deep into it, but I felt like it was kind of okay. I'm just going to return to form in a stylistic sense.
I mean, it's the most Rob Zombie movie Rob Zombie's ever made. Like, at least in terms of like,
well, it's a music video, you know, and you get that's a lazy critique, but it's like it's truly kind of like the old school Rob Zombie music video. But unfortunately, there's like just nothing to hang.
The character stuff
on,
up front is its weakest part. You don't care about any of them.
I didn't
at all.
I never felt more distant.
Yeah, like, they're not real characters.
Well, I don't understand. Like, I don't get in any of his films, and I get that that's maybe the point, because look, I go to the New Beverly all the time. I see exploitation movies, but like I don't think he knows the difference between an antagonist and a person. Like for a while, we spend so much time with this Mexican midget Nazi character, and I'm not sure. Am I supposed to be rooting for him because then he kills one of the main characters, and the way it's presented, you're like. I feel really bummed. Actually, am I supposed to side?
Well, yeah, I mean, his movies always kind of blur.
I
that
guarantee
line hero
some
and
people
villain,
are going to like it, but I will say that even if you're someone who doesn't really like it, you might be like me, where seeing that in a theater is still somehow there's something about it that's still like, oh, that's cool. There's still crazy movies being made, and there's one thing in it that got me. There's a scene where the character's introduced, even though you've seen him up front. With Nosferatu playing that, I'm just laughing. Because I'm like, no one makes shit like this. It's so deranged and idiotic, but but the actor's so fucking good. So this guy Richard Brake to me is a complete star.
I agree with you on
and
that.
I hope people see that part of it. I can't say I love the film. I did see a film I loved, absolutely loved. It might be one of the best films I saw this year. And I was telling Dick Gurner how much I loved it, and he goes, "Oh, Rebekah loves that movie." I'm like, "I've never heard her talk about that." And he said, "Yeah, it was the episode you were sick." And I don't listen to the episodes. It is I Am Not a Serial Killer.
Oh, dude,
the title is terrible.
I love this movie.
That title, I was like, I'm never going to watch it. I had heard nothing. When's the last time you heard nothing? And I went on VOD, and I was like, you know what? I went on Letterboxd, and I saw all these 5-star reviews. I was like, what? Yeah. So I didn't even read them. Push play. This movie was so fucking refreshing. I think Rob would love it. Yeah. Because it feels like a throwback. It feels like a 90s movie.
This is the one I described to you as Fright Night meets Dexter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm in.
And it's the coolest thing is it's shot on 16mm film, and it just has a feeling. It's a mixture of that innocent 80s feeling of a story, but with actual horror moments that, aren't really scary, but it's just fun. And that movie I just love. That's probably the sleeper I've seen this year, where I haven't heard people talking about it. Besides hearing now that you liked it and Bekah, it's different though. You're not hearing people talk about it, and it deserves to be spoken. And it's Christopher Lloyd. So if you want an '80s connection, Christopher Lloyd has a great role in it.
And it's from the director of a movie called Isolation. That was his name. The filmmaker is Billy Burke. He's a Irish filmmaker, I believe.
Yeah, because it looked like it might have even been shot in Ireland, but for America.
Yeah. But it was. But he did this movie called Isolation, which I think came out in 2006. And it's like a. Fuck, man! It's a monster run amok on a farmland kind of thing. It's like a bioengineer kind of mistake, kind of playing on bioengineered food and all this other kind of stuff. I remember seeing it in Spooky Dan's backyard, and I remember going, "Oh man, this movie!" You don't often see people who outright go, "I'm going to use Alien 3 as a reference to my film," but he used it looked weird. Exactly like that, and that always stuck with me. And then he just kind of went off the map, and he came back with this movie, and I was like, talk about a movie like you love the kid, you love Max Records. Max Records.
He's so good. Well, it's a coming of age film. It's a coming of age film, but it's like, but the character is somebody who, the character is kind of battling his. There's a duality to him. He hasn't done anything yet that's wrong, but he's fighting it. It's a character on the cusp and meeting something worse. Yeah, and it's a really terrific film. Honestly, I think people will really dig it. I'm going to give you a quote if anyone can get this. I saw this movie. I don't think I've ever seen this before. I loved it. I swear to God, there's going to be a rape tonight. It's the key line in this movie where a cop says, "I swear to God, there's going to be a rape tonight." It is Incubus, starring John Cassavetes. And it is a batshit movie. Literally, the whole story of this movie is that a demon is coming back, and it's too well endowed, and it is killing women through rape. And it's killing in this New Hampshire or Massachusetts town of witches.
Incubus.
It is from 1981. It was based on a book, and people say the book's terribly boring. This is one of those Canadian gems, and here's the best part. It's like one of those movies where the material is so B, but the director is the guy who made, what's the classy British haunted house film?
John Howe, Legend of Hell House.
Legend of Hell House and Vampire Lovers or whatever. So it has this very classy, in a sense, direction. And then Cassavetes is just like, it's probably, I think, his last role, one of his last roles. He's kind of sleepwalking through this thing, literally wondering, why the fuck am I in this movie?
It's a weird movie.
It's a weird fucking movie, but it's one of those movies, it was on, and it's on, you can't get it anywhere. It's not on DVD, it's not anything.
What?
But it's fucking,
it's gotta be like on...
But it's streaming on Amazon.
Yeah.
That's what's so great about
it.
So I'm watching it on Amazon. It's a really bizarre film. I really think people should watch it, but I'll tell you, I
haven't watched that movie in years.
I haven't wanted to remake a movie harder than I'm just like, oh my god, everything about this movie except the fact that it's not a great movie. Yeah. And then last thing, one liner. I watched it again last night. Hadn't seen it since it came out on video. Battle Royale. You were just talking about Katana, Takeshi Katana. Man, it is such smart satire. It is funny, and it's the best directed film outside of like Tarantino in that.
Yeah.
Just the way it's put together. And I was just loving it. I was laughing my ass, and especially because I just started teaching again. I just could totally identify with Katana when he looks at them, just like, fuck all of you. I'm going to kill all of you on an island, you know? So
who can tell me about the sequel? Did anyone watch that?
I've never
seen
seen
it. 2?
Yeah,
I saw it. I mean, like that was another movie that got like a weird release, and I remember watching it. It was completely insignificant. Like,
really?
Same director or not?
I thought it was, because when the Blu-ray came out of the first one,
same director, but I think his son picked up. I think his son picked up
because he was old. That's right. Yeah, the Battle Royale director.
I think he passed away. The son picked up the reins, and then we got kind of like a patchwork movie. But I remember it not being a glaring insult to the fans of the first film, but it was just kind of like, meh.
Well, yeah, why bother? Yeah.
Now the first one, if you haven't seen it, and like me for so long, it was so fun to revisit.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah, it really is. I agree with that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, for me, you know what? I'm almost. I only got one filmmaker to talk about, 2 films, and I'm almost embarrassed to say that it's taken me this long to watch this movie because. Seriously, because I'm a big fan of this director, at least his early work. I'm talking about Jim Mickle, and I remember seeing Mulberry Street back. I think it was one of the 8 films to die for. And, you know, Larry Fessenden in it. He's part of that crew. So I saw it and I was like, this movie's crazy. Like rat zombie people? What's going on here? And then, you know, he bumped up a little bit with Stakeland, which I thought was a really cool movie as well. And, you know, he made a few movies since. And for whatever reason, I never got around to them. And it's like, you know, late one night, I got Netflix up. And Cold in July, based on the Joe Lansdale story. And it's like the first movie that Michael C. Hall did post Dexter. Yep. And I'm like, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to watch Cold in July because I've been meaning to. And it's rare, but man, did that movie blow me away. Like I knew nothing about it also. So I loved this movie. And, you know, the very basic premise, the way it starts out is that, you know, right in the opening, there's an intruder breaking into Michael C. Hall's house. He goes down, he hesitates, and he kills the guy. And that's kind of it. And you kind of got a little bit of the aftermath of like, you know, how do you deal with that? And then just by fate, the father of the burglar is just getting out of jail, and he's kind of a bad dude. And, you know, he might want a little bit payback. But what I loved about it is that, you know, you're emotionally invested in that part of the story. But the twists and turns that come from that, you would never predict from the first half hour what the last half hour is going to be.
And that last act is pure Lansdale, right? Like,
and that last act is amazing. It kind of reminded me... stylistically, the reason like I love this movie, love it. It's on Netflix since then. I absolutely give it my strongest recommendation. You know, like all those movies in the 90s post Pulp Fiction, kind of like the post Tarantino ripoff movies, which I still loved. Like I loved Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead.
There's even like a John Dahl, Last Seduction, kind of noir quality.
Red Rock West.
It felt like a perfect gem from that period, like the best post Tarantino movie you never got to see.
Oh, and Don Johnson's best role.
Oh my god,
since anything.
That's the thing. It's you know Michael C. Hall's amazing and it's Sam Shepard. Don Johnson owns that fucking.
Don
movie.
Johnson, and I've heard that character is going to get a spinoff. Something.
Well, yeah, and then you know I posted about it and everybody told me like, well, you know, are you watching Hap and Leonard? And I'm like, no, I'm not. It's like, oh, it's all the same characters and it's you know Don Johnson's characters in those stories at some point.
And Evan Katz directed some of that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a good show.
Jim Mickle's.
I heard all. It was good.
Yeah, I gotta figure out.
It's
how
not
to watch
as good
it.
as Cold in July. Cold in July is tonally more, you know,
top
what I mean,
notch.
than Happen
Great
Leonard,
film.
even though it's a good show.
And then you know, and then the next night I'm like skimming on Netflix and I was like, oh, I haven't seen his remake of We Are What We Are either. So let me do that one.
It's good.
And also blown away by it. You know, I haven't seen the original, but I hear he changes a lot of the roles.
Very different. Feels like
makes
a very
it
different movie. Luckily,
and that's the way you do a remake. But there was enough of his own style in it. And a few months ago, I hosted a Q&A for Fender Bender, Mark Pavia's movie, and the villain is Bill Sage, who is the father in this movie. So I was like, oh man, there's that guy. And
if you want some older Bill Sage, just check out American Psycho.
Oh yeah, he's in that. Yeah,
he's one of Patrick Bateman's cronies.
Weird. That's right. Yeah. But
everyone was in that, right? Jared Leto.
Everybody. But you know what? We are another one on Netflix that I strongly recommend. And if anything, because not only is Bill Sage great in it, but you got Michael Parks. And the two of them, their scene together, top notch.
It's not one of the best endings of that year.
Oh,
I think the last 20 minutes of that was because it's a slow burn getting you somewhere, but when it pays off, it pays off.
So again, now I'm all in on anything Mickle does. Quite frankly.
Well, and the best news of all, him and Joe Lansdale apparently they just were like a house on fire when they did Cold in July. So. I can imagine
Leonard is Lansdale stuff
exactly.
too, right?
But so I can imagine Mickle maybe being the one who finally does get Dead End Driving or something,
Oh yeah,
or the Drive-In or something up on screen, which no one's been able to do.
I hope
Coscarelli hasn't been able to do it.
He's such a unique and interesting filmmaker that not enough people in the genre are talking about. But I got to give it up for Jim Mickle.
Cool.
And speaking of unique talents that you wouldn't expect to be a horror fan. We have a very special guest coming on in a few minutes that you will know from his comedies. But if you pay attention to the show Key and Peele, or even in KEANU's got a lot of fun little horror references in it, then it should not surprise you how much he loves the genre. So stick around. We're going to be talking to Jordan Peele in a few minutes. Oof. All right, welcome back to the show, and boy, are we excited because the way that Ryan kind of told us about this whole deal was that, Jordan Peele, our special guest. Hi.
Hello, Jordan.
Jordan did a movie with Blumhouse.
Yep.
And through that process, Ryan, had a lot of conversations with him and said, he's a big horror fan.
He's a big horror fan. No, I mean, my fondest memories, Jordan, of the last year is you coming into my office and looking wistfully around at the posters. And,
you've got a good collection of stuff.
Yeah. And I realized, you know what? There's a twinkle in his eye. And that's that little twinkle that only horror fans get when they look at Rosemary's Baby posters.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, nice.
And I hung out there for probably a little bit uncomfortably long.
Yeah. I did have to say, hey, Bekah, can you get Jordan out of here, please? I got to work. And
it's not a museum. But no, very cool stuff. And Rosemary's Baby, that was definitely a bond for us. And you got some Halloween stuff in there. Very cool.
Well, I mean, a lot of it comes up in your work. But that's cool is that I doubt a lot of times when you're doing interviews for either the show or projects or movies, you get to talk about your love of horror. And that's what the show is all about. Yeah. And for us, I say this every week, so apologies for being repetitive. We're of the VHS generation. We grew up with that kind of growing up. What was it for you? How did you kind of get introduced to horror? I mean, did you come from a family that was kind of movie savvy and watching stuff all the time, or
not really? I got through into horror first through a friend of mine, very young, had the Fangoria magazines up, and I was kind of horror scared the shit out of me, and I had I kind of wasn't allowed to watch things my mother knew would freak me out, but this friend was a little bit of an escape. It was a place where his mom let him, so I would, go to this friend's house, watch. I remember at first what was the Fangorias. Like I think I experienced Nightmare on Elm Street, for example, through those Fangorias, and sort of pieced together, that I had somehow watched it. And of course, that those images scared me so much. I think it was right around the time Dream Warrior came out,
Nice.
So the third one, and and so very through play dates and friends, I sort of got these pieces of horror that invaded my psyche, and later on, I realized it's all me. It's my true passion.
But there was something there was some sort of stimuli to even just the visuals, the photographs themselves that were magnetic to you.
Yeah. And some things, something about Fangoria itself, it had such a sort of disregard for, it was all the goriest pictures. Yep. And I remember, just seeing some picture of somebody with his guts hanging out and just so extreme.
Yeah.
And so realistic.
Day of the Dead, probably.
Yeah, it could have been Day of the Dead. Yeah. I definitely remember one of the things that Dream Warriors did affect me. It was Dream Warriors was a movie that was on that cusp of scary as hell, but so fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it sucked me in. The fun I was okay with, and I could kind of watch it. And then later, when I'd go to sleep, it's like, okay, now I'm thinking about the dude that became a human puppet, because it's
the fantasy level, right, of the 80s. We often talk about on the show, the 80s had this really playful quality even to the darkest horror films, which was great.
And there was something too, I was going to say, there's something to Nightmare on Elm Street 3 that wound up being a beacon for all youth. Like Nightmare on Elm Street, that like attracted people. Nightmare on Elm Street 2 kind of is similar, but there was like this kind of like ping out into the universe where every kid was like, I want to know what that movie is.
I think that 3 was kind of the perfect formula for the youth because it was still scary as shit. But at the same time, Freddy became a little bit funnier. Not full comedian Freddy that we saw in later like 4 and 5. Yeah. But he was just witty enough to say like, it's prime time, bitch, or let's get high. So it had that. And then it also had this really sweet rock and roll edge to it. So it just, for me as a kid, it was like rocking with Dokken, man. It was like the perfect formula of everything I loved at that time.
Well, that's right. I mean, Nightmare 3 to me is like the quintessential Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Like if you look at the whole franchise, that's the one. If you only watch one of them, I think you get everything that you need out of that franchise from that one movie.
Well, and it was also younger kids too.
Yeah,
I mean, like they were still kind of like high schoolers, but for I don't even know how old I was. I think I was still in middle school when that movie came out, but it was still like but they were high schoolers, but they were like. You somehow identified with them a little bit easier than Nancy and Glenn?
Yeah. They'd lived life, man. They'd seen shit.
That's right. They'd been to the dark side themselves. There was also this element where most conventional horror movies, certainly the other Nightmare on Elm Street, it's like the last 20 minutes you get the sort of becoming the badass to defeat the demon kind of thing.
The wish fulfillment of it all.
Yeah, they started kicking ass around the midpoint, or maybe even earlier.
Yeah.
And so there's something kind of empowering as a kid to watch, okay, yeah, man, there's scary shit going on, but they're badass, and they're what's usually reserved for the last 15 minutes of a horror movie, it was like, that was the project.
And you're only as good as the villain is bad, and because he's able to actually defeat them when they have superpowers. You know what I mean? You've really elevated Freddy's power, which is cool.
Right.
But they weren't all cool. That was another thing that I remember about 3 is that there were dorks in it too, like
the Dungeons and Dragons guy.
Yeah, the Dungeons and Dragons guy.
Room.
Yeah,
like the way we're talking about this movie.
That's right.
These are the dorks.
We were in that movie, guys.
and that was, of course, like he was the guy who the nurse, the hot nurse, Freddy turned into the hot nurse, and there was like that was where my VCR got stuck every time. Right? It's like. That was a breakthrough for myself, but yeah.
What were some of the for all of us? There's always the one movie that we saw maybe a little too young. The Indelible. Oh, that movie fucked me up. So, do you remember which horror movies maybe had a little bit too much of an impact on you?
It's hard to say. I think a lot of them I probably saw too young. But at the same time, it's hard to say too young. I saw The Shining when I was, probably too young, but it's so formative now that it wasn't.
The test with that film is: are you older or younger than Danny?
That's right.
Younger is fucked up.
That's a good point.
Older, you're safe.
A lot of the Stephen King adaptations freaked me out. I mean, certainly. But, there's moments in many different movies that just got to me. Zelda from Pet Sematary.
Oh, my God, yeah.
One of the scariest things of all time.
I'm still not too sure what she had spinal meningitis?
Spinal bifida, yeah.
Right.
I don't know. It was some messed up stuff.
We know.
It was messed up stuff.
You don't forget that moment.
That moment they're coming up the stairs and she pops up into action in the bed.
And it was a man. I only found that out like last year.
And it was a man.
All these years, I was like, oh my God.
That's right. At one point, this is awful, but at one point I was talking to Keegan about Pet Sematary, Keegan-Michael Key from Key and Peele, and he goes, "Oh, Jordan, let me tell you, I watched that movie with my cousin or something. What's her name from Pulp Fiction and Honey Bunny?
Amanda Plummer.
Amanda Plummer. He goes, Amanda Plummer freaked me out in that movie. Like, Amanda Plummer, I'm pretty sure she's not in it. He says she's in it. She was Zelda. Looked it up. It was a man. I was like, oh, Keegan. That's a rough,
good association, though.
Good association.
It is close.
And that's a sick burn on our listener, Amanda Plummer, who
is a wonderful actor. And, that freaked me out. Jaws 2. I saw, that one.
It's a mean-spirited movie.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it turned it into much more of a stalker film.
He's
right?
a slasher.
Yeah,
the shark is a slasher. Yeah.
Right, and one by one picking apart the teens that are having sex and whatnot. So that one got in early. Critters.
Oh yeah, love Critters.
Nice,
love it. And at the same time haunted me.
Yep.
But yeah.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just curious were you a scaredy cat? I mean, not so much with the horror movies, but in your life, like of the dark and stuff. Because I think a lot of people I meet who are really into horror were actually that kind of kid who was actually scared of something under their bed, and I almost coped. Horror films almost helped in the long run.
I think that was the case for me. Only, I didn't. It's horror films seem to be throwing gasoline onto that fire, at the time. And then when I think until I was about 12 or something, some switch happened, and I had realized that I had been sort of stocking my imagination with all these awful images to the point where now I can kind of roll with them and have a familiarity with them and have this association. And so, there was a while I was so deeply afraid to be, at night and alone in my bed. And then at the turning point, I'm just purely passionate about horror. And instead of putting off seeing them, but having that morbid curiosity, I'd go towards them.
Yeah, it's funny. It's really interesting. It seems to be a real pattern.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Stephen King before. So did your love, when you were getting into these films in your teens, did your love extend outside of movies? And did you start reading stuff like Stephen King, Clive Barker, and just, celebrating all kinds of horror stuff?
Yeah, I did. Although I'm not a terribly good reader, but Stephen King and Clive Barker, I pushed myself into several of their books, and for the record, Candyman's one of my favorites as well. I mean, that's
definitely.
that was a real.
It's one of the highlights of the '90s. Like we look at in decades,
possibly the best of the 90s.
I think it's
like the best horror movie of the
certainly
90s.
the classiest. That's for sure. I mean, it's so well made,
really classy, and that was and that was a short story. I went and sought out of his, and then but we're talking about Clive Barker. I mean, Nightbreed was, which I guess is probably late '80s, right? But
1990. Well, the book maybe, but the movie.
Yeah.
Right on the cusp.
That's another one that had that perfect mesh of scary stuff. Cronenberg is terrifying in that, and but it's it sort of aligned the viewer with the monster in a way that was empowering. So kind of like. Nightmare on Elm Street 3, where the kids get the powers and they get to fight back and stuff. There's something kind of cool about the vagueness of what is monster, what is man, what is hero, what is villain.
Right. I think what's interesting about Nightbreed is that it kind of did something in horror that you hadn't seen in a while, which was what you were talking about, which is align yourself with a monster, which kind of fell in line with the latter days of the Universal Classic movie monsters, because you started out watching them going, oh, I'm terrified of the Frankenstein monster. Oh my God, Wolfman is vicious. Oh my God, the Invisible Man is a terrorist. Right. And then as the movies went on, you were like, I identify with those guys. I know what the Frankenstein monster is about, except with Nightbreed, it did it in a post-'80s kind of prism, which was hardcore horror. Like you had Shuna Sassy, who's like completely naked but porcupine, quills, and you had
still hot, right?
It just did it very well in that regard,
really well.
Yeah,
and that was also the era of the supernatural killer franchise, which all those movies kind of started. Felt like our protagonist is is Nancy or whatever, but as the sequels started coming out and the heroes became expendable, Freddy becomes funnier.
Yeah.
And people start going out to see Nightmare on Elm Street because we relate to Freddy, and there's a sort of like guilty pleasure of it's the stalker thing. We're seeing through the stalker's eyes.
Even Jason kind of progressed to funny at one point when he's like picking up campers in their sleeping bags and just hurling them. I remember there's a girl who gets killed with a party horn at one point. Like it gets almost absurd.
Well, Manhattan.
He goes to New York.
You're wearing a New York hat, so Yankees.
Kicking the boombox is like a cognizant Jason being a straight up dick.
Of course, he's on a boat for 90% of the movie. It's a long ride to Manhattan.
So, which of the franchise guys with the horror icons stood out to you the most? Was it Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, or did you love them all?
Definitely Freddy. Just from youth, Freddy had something. It was such a completely. It was a boogeyman that had just no regard for taste in a way that I thought was just really something very disturbing about the Wes Craven's mentality behind that character that just seeped into it. As far as just pure chilling, I mean, Chucky just killed it, right? I mean, that was such.
He's also funny and gets funnier.
Also funny, gets funnier. I tend to be much more into the earlier years with these guys, like most of us.
Well, the first Nightmare, people forget it's a scary movie.
It's a scary movie.
When we were young, it scared the piss out of most of us.
And holds up.
And
it immensely holds up.
Well, Wes Craven, every 10 years, he reinvented the genre with something really fucked up. Like an idea that was just fucked up. And then he would slowly, it wasn't even the franchise. When he came back to his new Nightmare, did you see that in theaters?
Yes, which was kind of like his first stab at the Scream concept, right?
Definitely self-referential horror,
But that one scared me. New Nightmare, when it came out.
The idea was still really strong. It's just, first half, I think, was really strong.
Yeah. But wait a minute. Periphery characters, though. I mean, you've got like Pinhead. Pinhead is always on the periphery. Leatherface is always. I always feel like he's on the periphery.
Yeah. I definitely go Michael Myers all the way. If you have to pick one, he's the king, right? I mean, I think
brain scan.
Brain scan. Brain scan.
Was there any horror? I think we all had it when we were young, but like that you couldn't pick up. Like, was there any VHS covers where you're like either too worried about what was behind it? Because for me, it was necromantic shit like that, or there was those boxes that the Gene Roland Film Company. What's that company called? Who puts
Redemption?
out Redemption? So it has this logo that just scared the shit out of me.
It forms
I couldn't even touch those. They're black and white weird woman with no top.
You were scared by that?
It just freaked me out.
Elric, why were you scared?
You're scared of the Redemption logo. It's going to be a documentary.
Yeah, there's logo fear. But I mean, were there any horror that you were like, that's not my bag? Or even like how we had a torture porn phase. Was there kind of horror that just turned you off?
I think probably the stalker genre did at first. I don't like anything kind of rapey or anything like that, or the late 70s kind of got into like the true shock, very real grounded shit. I would say that
he's wearing a spit on your grave T-shirt. People, you can't see it. He's a total fraud.
Right, I'm a total fraud. No, I was much more into Lady in White.
Oh yeah,
just came out on Blu-ray, or is about to come out on Blu-ray.
Yeah, that to me was one of the greats, and I think like a lot of these things that we're talking about, it was an easy in to relate to it because you had the kid protagonist and that vulnerability, the same kind of thing you get with Danny Torrance. So
it's like more supernatural.
I was more into the supernatural. I still am,
and that was a rich decade for it. So
oh my gosh, yeah.
Did your mom ever find out what you were
doing? I mean, she really
does now.
She knows now. She had the the task of having to get me to go to sleep. So it would be, that sort of tug of war of, did you watch some scary movie? No, no, I didn't. But she was also very, she was kind of instrumental as well in my love of horror. She's the one that had the Stephen King books. She had she has this real amazing sense of humor, and I think early on, she had this thing that she would do to me where she'd go, maybe I was like, goofing off or something, or needed some sort of little discipline or something. She'd go, go say something to my mom, and she goes, "Mommy's not here." She'd just go into like this weird.
That's your creepy. What is it? The Save a Child cancer one you did.
Yeah.
Miriam.
I want to pee on a dying man.
That's
exactly what
I can do. But she had this little game where, she could sort of, and I, was no siblings, single mom, so she could really freak me out. I mean, stop, Mom, don't do it. Mother's not here.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, wow.
And so and I'd have this giggle, this nervous laughter, but I'd still get, fruck out or whatever. And so I definitely have observed this really tight connection between comedy and horror. And I think part of the reason, I wanted to make this horror movie I made with Blumhouse is because I felt like, I'd finally gotten all the comedic pedigree into shape, and I could sort of apply so many of these rules to the thriller genre, but at the same time do a movie that was firmly grounded in thriller. And, you just find that so much of it, both genres, is grounding absurdity. I always feel like in comedy and in horror, the more real the world is that your absurd notion is, the scarier it is. Jacob's Ladder is another.
Great one. Yeah. It's all tension release, right? Both comedy.
You take it serious. It's funny that you mention it because I always tell people that my two favorite genres. I grew up on horror and I grew up on comedies, in particular 80s comedies. Yeah. And the reason when I justify them both, I'm like, they're the only two genres that I know of that can instigate a immediate reaction out of your audience. You can't help but jump and get scared, and sometimes you can't help but laugh out loud when you see something. That's I love that correlation. When did you start seeing that? And maybe we could touch also on horror comedies if that works, because that's always the toughest sell. Yeah. But then you look at something like An American Werewolf in London, you're like, but that's perfect.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it's interesting because I was talking to a long time ago when I think it was around Land of the Dead when that came out and George Romero was doing his press tour. I had interviewed him about we were just doing the general kind of talking about horror, and he goes, you know what? He goes, everybody fucking thinks they can make a horror movie. Everybody. And he goes, everybody thinks they can make a comedy, but they can't. He goes, I would never try a comedy, but I know horror. He goes, but I feel like he felt like the two biggest genres that people feel like they can automatically do because they could point to it and go, "Oh, I could do that." It's horror and comedy, but it's
probably the two hardest.
But it's a ballet. It's a completely, and to merge those two, it's like it's a delicate balance.
And you can't bullshit them because without talking to your audience if it was good. Because they reacted. Yeah. You don't even need scorecards. You can kind of see it. Unlike a drama, Oscar bait kind of thing.
If you don't hear anything, you're doing it wrong. Right. Yeah. And I think you're right that comedy horror, the hybrid, seems to be one of the trickiest things to do. It's been pulled off so few times well. And
what's for you? What's the pinnacle of horror comedy? Which one's for you?
Well, first I'll just say, I think the secret is in that grounding thing. Yeah. And both the genres, they sort of unground each other if you allow them to. So in other words, the moment, if you're doing you want a horror comedy to be both scary legitimately and funny legitimately. Yeah. Not be funny but not scary or vice versa.
He's heading towards Chopping Mall.
He's easing us into it, so we're going to get to the chopping mall.
He's getting there.
But the problem is, you do a bit, you tell a joke or something, and that sort of ungrounds the reality of the horror, or vice versa. I think it's very hard to sort of maintain this very real thing.
Or they pitch the drama as funny drama, like Up. It's higher, bigger performances, and then you're not grounded.
You're not grounded. Right. You might not get the laugh or the scare.
Right.
So I think when it's done right, every time it's done right, it's a very specific mixture. It's a very specific alchemy. Yeah. I cite Ghostbusters as a great one. Yeah. Even though it's leaning on comedy, certainly as a kid, the scary scenes are legit and they're great.
Gosh. That Librarian messed me up. That was one that I saw.
Librarian, the hands in the
dogs.
chair, the devil dogs. It's all good stuff, and I think the bedrock that's grounding both the comedy and the horror is it feels real. Like, you know, especially on the comedic level in that movie. It's the whole joke is that it's normal guys. It's like it's guys who are kind of plumbers and eating Chinese food and
just getting by,
and you know, sort of saying, all right, what if you took Exorcist and applied it to the big city? Well, they'd be kind of like exterminators. So it had this foundation of like very, you know, applying reality to these two extreme things, and that was just It's a perfect movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think you have I always view that as comedy horror. I know this is stupid, but I see that it's a comedy horror versus a horror comedy. Yeah. I think of Evil Dead 2 as a horror comedy, reanimated horror comedy. But these bigger movies it's a comedy first with horror elements. You know?
So what's Burbs for you?
Definitely comedy horror.
Okay,
but I love it. It's perfect, is what it is to me.
Yeah,
it's a perfect movie.
I think who the characters are, who the protagonist is probably big. You know, about that. It's like if you have a funny lead, it's kind of the comedy horror. Yeah. Scream is one of the great,
horror comedies. Yeah.
Horror comedy, and there's very few that I've seen that have danced on both of those in that way, which is why I love, if I was to do a horror comedy, I would probably lean towards the horror part. I feel like, first of all, that the comedy is becoming more and more second nature, more my bread and butter. So the horror part, it's like that to me is the part that can really get unhinged with the wrong style of joke or bit. You know,
did you see? What did you think about Cabin in the Woods? That's the last one I remember that truly had both.
Because
it felt
before that
funny
was like,
and scary.
It was like Jennifer's Body before that, and Cabin in the Woods, and both were kind of. I mean, the Cabin in the Woods did okay.
It's funny with them people we know, everyone's like loves it, but then you go, the audience didn't go to it.
Great. Yeah, it was that was a complex one for me because I'm such a fan of this genre and what we're talking about. And there was something Cabin in the Woods, it had kind of like this Gremlins 2 like release of like, all right, let's just go for it. You know, balls to the wall. Yeah. Let's be meta. Let's give them everything. And I would have really loved it when I was a kid. I think ultimately my problem with Cabin in the Woods is it didn't really chill me, but I have so much love and respect for that project because of they did it.
I think that's the overarching kind of feeling from horror fans is like it didn't scare them. You know,
it wasn't scary.
It wasn't because Scream had the mastery of Wes Craven to guide you through the kind of orchestrated chase sequences and the kills.
Right.
Cabin in the Woods just felt like it was all idea.
But I think that horror fans still love Cabin in the Woods because it was winking at them the whole time.
It was referential, and referential doesn't scare. Almost ever. I can't really think of a film that uses references to the genre and can still get you. You know?
It was rooted in the genre, right? I mean, the story itself, it was almost a parody of the genre, and so it didn't have that base of feeling real that I think could have served it a little bit more.
What do you know about parody? Just calm down. Come on.
Well, I was going to say, do you feel like horror fans don't like being made fun of? Like when you kind of like feel like you're kind of talking to them, like they're being talked down to. I always kind of feel like when a movie does that and makes the horror fan feel small, like they completely reject the movie. They're like, fuck this movie, you know?
Like, you mean like when you're watching a movie like, I don't know, like something like
maybe Scary Movie? Like I feel like something that's like way over the top. Yeah. Because I'll watch it and I'll be, I'm like, guys, this is not landing. Although every once in a while, we'll get something. There'll be a gag that works. But I feel like maybe Cabin in the Woods sometimes divides people because they feel like they're being talked down to. But at the same time, my argument also is guys, they're going so deep cut into this
that's the difference, right?
that you shouldn't be mad about it. You know, it's weird. It's a weird dichotomy. You know,
there's an element of that movie where it does feel like it's kind of for horror fans in that I think horror fans get it immediately and instantly. Yeah. But it is kind of structured for somebody maybe not a horror fan to still get it. Yeah. So it has a little bit of as a horror fan, I think it's you want to feel like you're ahead of it, or you are ahead of it, maybe a little bit more. But
all right, I want to talk about Jennifer's Body for a second. What are your thoughts on Jennifer? What are your thoughts on Jennifer?
I never saw Jennifer.
You never saw it?
We're gonna take a quick commercial break. 96 minutes.
Have you guys done a lot of Jennifer?
No, he's done a lot of Jennifer's Body.
What?
Cheers.
Did you see? I'm just curious because I remember seeing it so viscerally. Blair Witch in theaters. Did you see it when it hit? What'd you think?
I did. I loved it.
First found footage. Had you seen a found footage before that?
No.
I
guess I hadn't. I mean, there's the elements in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There,
that's true.
But no, I was, and I think most people remember Blair Witch. I didn't know anything, man. I thought it was real. I wasn't quite there. I had a couple.
That's my favorite part. My favorite joke in KEANU. Blair Witch. That's when I thought it was real.
Everybody went to the same screening of Usual Suspects. Sixth Sense, right? Yeah. But I loved Blair Witch, and I love Paranormal Activity. I mean, I think those are two of my all-time favorites, and it's because of what we're talking about. It's like nothing is more sacred in those movies than the reality part. So when it gets to the scares, all they have to do is tweak a little bit, blow somebody's hair, set up some sticks, and your imagination goes crazy. But it's because you're allowed to feel like, oh my God, this could be me and my friends. This could be what the hell is going on. So loved it. 100%.
We all want to see the new one coming out.
Probably
soon.
We're hoping to.
2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
The paranormal films, even the sequels, kind of creep me out. Even if they're bad and you watch them alone, there's something about them that because it just feels like security cameras or something.
Meanwhile, here at the House of Blum, the walls are starting to bleed on top of Elric.
They're all
to shut him up.
They forced me to say that.
It really, but the pace of that movie. I remember seeing that one in the theater, and that one was it's such a masterclass in how little you have to do to scare the bejesus out of the entire crowd. And my favorite part of that movie is probably about 2/3 of the way through it. There's that. I think it's after the advisor comes and goes, oh no, this is a demon. Which is also, first of all, one of my second favorite part of the movie, because it's like, okay, the intentions of this thing become clearer, which are not good, and that just throws this whole thing. But there's a moment where we go back to the the camera in front of the bed, and we've been there probably 6 times already, and this is the one where the shit hits the fan, right? We all know, but I remember in the audience, the moment it comes up, just from where we are in the movie, the entire audience had this. Oh, we've been watching this, silently the whole time, but the audience knew this is the one. They've strung us along, and now something's going to happen. I don't want to be a part of this. And I just thought that was so powerful by introducing this same device that you've already set up and we've already sat through. That all of a sudden, there's this huge reaction to it.
Yeah,
that was like a joke.
Like a good joke.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. On that note, with Paranormal Activity, Blair Witch, and even when we mentioned Scream before, the theatrical experience is still very important to all of us. Right. But do you remember which movies stand out to you like that? Like, what were some of the best horror theatrical experiences? You'll never forget it because of how it played with an audience.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably Paranormal was probably my all-time craziest. Experience in a theater with an audience, with a horror audience. I mean, other than that, it's interesting because the audiences tend to lock into the cheaper ones more. Yeah. There's or the type of audience that goes to a cheaper sort of movie is sort of gets into it more. And I don't know. I guess I don't know what I mean when I say cheaper. I mean something a little bit
easier
more
scares.
Easier scares.
It's a black cat jumping out on a car. Sure. There was one movie I saw. I was like, I think it was 2002, 2003. I'm not going to name the movie.
Why not?
It's called Darkness Falls.
There you go.
And literally a black cat jumped out on the hood of the car, and I was like, "Are you kidding kidding me? In 2002, 2004, whatever it is.
There was one, and I can't even remember it. It had like a younger female like it was a remake too, like When a Stranger Calls or something like that. That came out,
with the cat?
and it was repeatedly like the cat. I was like, why are you even putting up with this cat? Just put it outside. It keeps coming up
on YouTube. There's cat scare montages.
Yeah.
You can watch all.
I love the horror supercuts.
Yeah,
I love all those online. It's like the mirror gag, you know. Yeah. It's like you close the medicine chest mirror, and it's like, you know, or the ones that don't happen, you know. So silly.
The other thing about the audience, you know, it's another link to comedy in that they really are. The best way to watch both is with an audience.
Sure. And
the laugh on comedy, the fear in a horror is sort of becomes exponential, becomes communal, and that's what I really loved about The Cabin in the Woods was the sort of statement they're saying about what horror movies are for us, that it's somehow purging this
ritualistic
it's this ritualistic thing. And that's really how I feel about both genres, is that these are the ways that we as people deal with our fears and our troubles and the worst things in life. Sometimes it's to laugh, sometimes it's to put ourselves through that in a not real way, but to experience that. And you know, often it's both. You know, I love a really good horror movie. It's like the scare turns into a laugh in the audience because the nerves are there.
And you're having a bad day, and that person's being ripped apart. You're like, hey, it's not that bad. That's right. I call it perspective.
That's right.
I'm curious about, you know, growing up for you, how horror kind of played into your upbringing in terms of kind of like, in terms of society, in terms of your friendship circles. Like, because I remember for me, you know, being a horror fan, you know, I carried around a VHS version of Evil Dead 2 in my backpack, and I was like, yo, you guys got to see this movie. Check this out. And then everybody would be like, you're really fucked up. Or Dead Alive. When Dead Alive came out, like I rented the Laserdisc, taped it to put it on VHS, and then I spread it around. But that did not make me any more popular, and I wanted to so bad
for that.
You know, I mean, having Fangoria and my Trapper Keeper was not hiding it.
But for you, I mean, like, was it overt or was it kind of something? I mean, like, horror was always part of the kind of counterculture, you know, and you were the misfit, you know.
It sort of became that in high school. I sort of wore it as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
I think what people, you know, horror fans, one of the things we love about horror is that there are people who can't take it.
Yeah.
Right? There's a pride when you talk to someone who's like, no, I can't watch horror movies.
Yeah.
I can't.
Well, maybe it starts with your parents, right? It's like a screw you to your parents.
That's right. Yeah. And there's something very empowering about sort of feeling like, oh wow, I'm mastering fear in a way that other people can't handle. And I think it does. I think it was very huge for me. Very, very much proud. You know, when I could accept horror movies and go for it. In my
great soundbite for the article. He has mastered horror.
I've mastered horror.
So you can write that as the heading. He's now a master of horror.
Well, you know, for me, the mastering of horror was to be able to watch it without pissing my pants at night. That was it. It was just
still working on that.
Still working on that. I've by no means mastered horror, but I love the identity of being able to handle it, and like I said, up through 12 years old, I really couldn't.
Is there any truth to that skit? I think one of the funniest things you guys did was the one where you walk out of a horror movie and you're like, man, that was a stupid movie. Where'd you park? Over there. Where'd you park over there? And the two guys have to like walk together to their car because deep down they're terrified. Did you have experiences like that with a friend? Because to me that's a classic.
Well, you know, that's really about, you know, I grew up in, you know, Upper West Side, Manhattan, would go to Lowe's 84th for my horror movies, which was at that point, you know, pretty much kind of like, it was the blacker of the two theaters you could go to on the Upper West Side. And, you know, the African-American horror movie audience is such a wonderful audience to watch thrillers with, because they're more demonstrative. We yell at the movies, and it's everything that everybody wants to do at the movie. But there's a feeling of this event, and so I always just loved that. a lot of the African American audience members that I would see horror with, would have like, this idea of like, nah, you ain't gonna scare me. You ain't gonna scare me. You ain't gonna get me. It's like, it's not real. It's stupid. It's stupid. It's stupid. But the more stupid that they were calling something, the more you can just watch people just freak out, jump on their chair. Nah, ain't get me.
I saw 28 Days Later deep in Brooklyn, and it was just like a random was visiting there, and it was like opening night or whatever, and it was the loudest audience I've ever seen. And I just remember this one woman, she just kept saying every time you'd shower, if I see your dick one more motherfucking time, every time. That's great. But it was like a totally different experience.
Oh, that's
it wasn't
great.
Watching a movie in the same way. It's not. Yeah. It's no longer. It really is more like a live show.
Well, it's a testament. It's a testament to the theatrical experience,
yeah.
which is waning. I mean, like the greatest. I mean, like I saw many movies in Jersey City where I was going to college. In New York, it was like Bride of Chucky, Halloween, H2O, good movies. Elevated theatrically, great movies.
Yeah, great audience,
and
great
then
movie.
coming out here, seeing Exorcist, the director's cut at the Man's Chinese Theater, that was an event. That was like, people really got into it. They slipped in that new spider walk sequence, and people lost their fucking minds.
You know what movie I saw recently that people actually like? I saw it in North Hollywood near my house, but The Visit. I wasn't expecting for people to be like screaming and going, "Oh no, run from that!" And they were.
Yeah,
and
actually,
it
I had
was
that
like
same experience.
it was a
Pretty
very
good crowd for
reactionary
that,
film.
I thought that was an amazing movie. I thought had some of the scariest sequences.
Her under the floor.
That's when people were actually like yelling at the
and
screen.
her picking up the camera like,
Yeah, when she's on.
Who made that? Which company made that film?
Yeah, who did
And now a plug for Blumhouse.com.
The scene with the end with the diaper too.
Not the end.
No, that's not blowing anything. That's not blowing
Bekah.
anything. Oh, come on. That doesn't blow anything.
It's just only going to send people to order that movie.
Yeah.
Diaper.
Now go get that. But yeah, that's another place where people were like screaming, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I think M. Night is truly a modern master of fear. His scares haunt my shit. They really no pun intended.
I see a whole skit coming from
there. we did have a sketch we never did actually that we wrote in I think the first or second season. It kept hanging around, but I was trying to be M. Night's assistant.
Oh my
Keegan was playing M. Night Shyamalan, and I think the whole I don't remember somehow. He was in the interview. He was keeping me on my toes, and he was conducting the interview like one of his movies, all the way to the twist and everything. Anyway, nice. I'm a huge fan of his actually, and I know there's been there's feelings all over the board on him. I feel like he's say what you will about
he
his.
made some big movies.
Look, I mean, like no. Look, I mean, like everybody's have their ups and downs. It's like all the big guns, even from the '70s. It's like De Palma and Craven.
That De Palma documentary. It's mentioned one hit to a failure.
Friedkin. It's like let's not forget when Friedkin made The Guardian.
We all have a ghost.
I love The Guardian.
Oh
shit!
And no,
everyone has a
to our
ghost
sponsor.
of Mars, guys. It happens.
Everyone has a ghost of Mars.
Bekah.
But I do love that. One thing you can expect when you're watching one of his movies is that you can't really know what to expect. He does him. He does his thing, and I appreciate somebody who's making films. Love them or hate them, that are unique and in his own style and genre.
Sure.
And I feel like he and De Palma, although people will call me heretic for this, but they're two guys who at least attempted to pick up that Hitchcock mantle.
The biggest De Palma fan in the world is like sitting right there.
I mean, I'm a fan, but did you see the documentary on him?
I did.
It's just great how candid he is about when it doesn't work and people hating his work. Like I gotta remember one of the first movies I remember going, oh my God, what the fuck? This is such a movie, was Snake Eyes. I remember when I saw Snake Eyes in the theater, I was like, Jesus, man, like there's
a fucking title.
I know this is a movie. You never
movie.
are lost in the movie. You're always knowing you're watching a movie. And so with De Palma, sometimes that just doesn't work, and then sometimes he hits it, and it's a weird. But I love just how open he was to discuss it. It's a great flick.
Blowout is
Blowout
is the one, right? I mean, that's like
and Dress to Kill. I think Dress to Kill is
Dress to
freaking
Kill.
great.
Yeah,
That's the thing. I always say this about some of the horror guys too, but it's like when you look at a filmography from a director, it's like it's so hard to get one classic, one that no one will ever forget, that changes things. So it's like, John Carpenter, no matter what he makes, and I like a lot of his films, he made fucking Halloween. Wes Craven did it 3 times.
But Carpenter had a run of maybe 6 in a row that are
they were great.
Yeah.
But like with M Night, obviously he made The Sixth Sense, which is a great movie, and Unbreakable is my favorite of his movies. And it's like he made it. So like no matter what he makes from here on out, you could hate it, you can like it. He's done at least 1 or 2 that are like, kind of classic.
I'm pretty psyched to see the one he's got coming up. Slight.
I know. It's crazy.
Split. Thank you.
Slight's another one.
Who produced that? Who produced that movie?
That would be.
Oh my god.
We need you because you don't work for this company at all.
Yeah, so you can say it.
Say shit.
I love all of them. I even loved Ghost Dimension by Blumhouse.com. It was my favorite of the paranormal activity films.
Blumhouse.com had nothing to do with this.
Is there somebody behind you?
But I was going to say, it's not, in terms of like, directing classics, it's not a fucking race. It's just like, what kind of movies are you putting out into the world that say, this is me? Like Craven to the very end, what was the... Brian Collins' favorite movie, My Soul to Take. Even to the bitter end. Man.
Originally 25-8.
Yeah. He's still, he was still injecting a little bit of that Craven flavor in there. He wrote it. He wrote the movie. So it's
still Fang time. It's cool.
Oh God.
But I remember, talking to Nick. Remember he did this. Wes produced his last one. Nick was saying Wes had like 10 things he was trying to get made up until the last couple weeks. You're all over the place.
Well, you're focused on where you are in your life at that moment, creatively.
Right.
I'm just curious because obviously Elric brought up a few of your skits and stuff, but I tend to love when you kind of touch on horror stuff. The Gremlins 2 thing is one of the funniest things I've seen. So you guys are. If you can talk a little bit about the creative process, because when you're doing a show, you're trying to come up with X amount of skits and stuff like that. So how much does your personal tastes kind of flow into what you're working on? I guess it has to be a big portion of it.
Yeah, it's huge. I think with anything, any type of art, comedy, horror, or anything else, I think one thing that from doing improv, which is kind of my pedigree from like 19 to 23, you sort of learn that if it's personal, then it works for whatever reason. So when we were doing Key and Peele, the idea was let's make a show that only Keegan and I can perform. That we could write and perform. We did have writers, but that's kind of like a perfect screening method. It's like if it doesn't come through our voices and it doesn't have something that if you could give the sketch to an SNL or another sketch show and they could pull it off and it could be equally good, it wasn't for us. And that was kind of that was kind of the rule, and it is similar to this movie I just did here. It's a point of view film. It's very much, it's funneled through my experiences to an extent, and that's kind of my especially when breaking into a new genre or breaking into a show. It's like all you can start with is your expression, and I think what a lot of artists get tripped up by is, we're artists, so we all kind of we hate our expression, we hate ourselves, we hate what we're putting out. We're tired of what we're working on 5 minutes into starting, and no, it's got to be better. But what you find in improv a lot is things that aren't necessarily funny to you hit with an audience. Specifics, there's this improv game where somebody does improvises a monologue, and everyone improvises based on it. I was always afraid to do this game because it's like you want the monologues to be funny and whatnot. Time after time again, if you tried to make this monologue funny, you get nothing. If you just tell a story from your life that's real, people laugh and they find the moments of truth, they find the specifics. So that's kind of been my MO so far.
So where does Racist Zombie come from?
So Racist Zombie.
Yeah, is that your critique on Walking Dead and what was happening? Every black character was getting killed off, or what?
It was actually.
Was it really for real?
Originally? Yeah, it was originally a response to that very notion, but it was that sketch was written by this guy Rich Tallarico, who's a brilliant guy from the Second City. And he put together this amazing concept. We latched onto it very quickly, and basically what happens with the process is someone will, come up with this sketch idea. We'll kind of riff it out, and the ones that feel right and feel like they're a Key and Peele sketch will all, we'll dogpile on, all tell jokes, and then ultimately, usually I or one of the other EPs will sort of, strip it down to what it needs to be. But we definitely overwrite, overshare with each other, and throw a lot out.
I like that. My favorite one is I made a joke when you sat down about continental breakfast, but what I loved about it is it starts as this really bizarre, almost Forrest Gump type character who goes into a hotel and he's just like, oh, you get a free continental breakfast. Ooh. Yeah, you get really taken with this idea, and then it becomes a Shining tribute. Yeah. And by the end, we are in the Shining, and you're crying, and I'm just like, this is one of the great. It was like one of the greatest short films I've ever seen.
Thank you. That's one of my favorites too. And I love, there's a lot that we've done. We do sort of all kinds of different layers and styles. It's all about changing it up so you don't know what to expect. Some of it is kind of heady and sort of smart. That was a nice, sort of stupid sketch in a way, and not stupid like it was easy to come up with, but just, we all relate to the idea of like continental sounds lofty. It sounds so, amazing, and then what it actually is. And then that's just...
He picks up the Danish. He's talking about each country, each food. Right. It's the yogurt. It's, Greece. He picks up the Danish. And what do you say? You say, Finland. Or Belgium. No, you say
something like that.
And it's just Belgium. Great because,
that, and, that's just a tramp.
Yeah,
character, right? The archetype. It's the guy. It's like Bugs Bunny, Charlie Chaplin.
Right.
They have no class, right? Bugs Bunny lives in a hole, but he's like, this is the life. He's eating his right. Charlie Chaplin's he's a homeless dude who dusts off an apple off the garbage and eats it like he's the king of England.
Yeah, somehow cures some girl's blindness. I don't know. I've never worked out how he got the money. It's City Lights, but it works.
That's right. So there's something really universal about that archetype that anytime it's used, it's like we all want to think we're better than we are at some point.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
How often do you keep up on modern horror and stuff like that? Like, obviously, I just saw Don't Breathe, which I loved. Mm-hmm. Do you keep up on what's going on horror-wise?
Not as well as I would like. I haven't seen Don't Breathe yet. And in fact, I haven't seen a couple of these big ones that have come out this year. Mostly because I'm working on my other, the other one. But, I definitely don't see anything that isn't considered the top-notch cream of the crop anymore. So, which I kind of, I sort of envy horror fans that'll just give it to me. I'll watch it all, whatever.
Right.
But we all kind of outgrow that to an extent because of commitments and getting older and time. I talked about it curmudgeonly. I sound curmudgeonly, but they do a little less for you, a little less. There's a shrinking love,
Yeah.
But when they're great, I don't know if you see the movie The Witch when you get a chance.
I saw
Those kind of things, whether they're great, like whether it's some people didn't like The Witch, obviously, but it's still going for that thing. It's going for that throwback to things in the 70s where it felt, like you said, grounded. Yeah. It's grounded in historical realism, and it's scary.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, sorry, horror just rolls with your age. It's as I'm entering into my 40s, my tastes are so. Someone told me when in my 20s, they were like, he was a writer that I knew very well, and he was like, Ryan, when you get older, you're just gonna stop giving a shit. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you've got a fire in you for horror. You really love this gore, but you know what? You're gonna start hating gore movies. And I'm like, no, I'm never gonna start hating gore movies. And then now I'm just kind of like, no, I want more. I want sophistication. I feel like it just kind of changes with your age a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And I think I can still sit through a movie if it has one new great scare.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen too often. I did love The Witch for that reason you're talking about. It felt like it really, we hear about so many witches, through growing up, and there's all sorts in pop culture. This one felt like they were saying like, you know, all the witches you heard about, fuck that. This is what a real witch looks like. Mm-hmm. And you know, though it didn't scare me that much. Yeah. I just loved the beauty of it. I loved that it felt like the first time you're watching something real that is a witch. Yeah. And so,
and it's pretty taboo early up, you know, with the babies and stuff.
Yeah, and it goes down.
That's a pretty good way to get you.
Baby's bloodbath. She's pretty gnarly, but afterwards, you know, you just need baby's bloodbath, and she's pretty hot.
Yeah. Is there a director whose work you follow, you know, old or new, who you're just like an autoristic kind of? Oh, I like David Lynch movies or Cronenberg, or is somebody who's you always will watch a new film from?
I mean, really, those guys.
Nailed it.
Although actually, I haven't seen Cronenberg's last few, so I
got drama.
Hear mixed things about.
You're okay.
But I love
very talky.
Okay, yeah.
Unfortunately,
but I do love him. Mm-hmm. You know, I would say, you know, my answers to that probably aren't going to be too fun. I love you know, obviously old school Spielberg. You know, when Spielberg does horror, it's you know,
or fantasy. My God,
fantasy,
man,
it's the greatest movies of all time for me. And you know, I know it's controversial, but you know, M. Night is the guy out there right now that I just have this. You know, it's a guilty pleasure because I feel like I get out. You know, there's a lot of haters out there, but he's somebody I know I'm going to get a certain quality. I know I'm going to get something new. And you know, the visual quality, the visual storytelling quality, and he's not going to get a movie by me.
I never watched the one where he's the big fantasy thing. That was the one where
Lady in the Water, the
Airbender,
right?
Yeah, that was the one where but that's probably him just making a big non-personal.
Well, that was
right?
I was going to say that's somebody else's IP,
yeah.
so it feels like there's already a disconnect immediately, right? You know, and I'm sure that I never saw it either, but I'm sure that showed through the work, you know, because it was just like he probably found some what did he do before that? Lady in the Water, so it's probably like one for them
the
kind
Village.
of deal.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to hear your top five. Top 5 horror.
Whoa! All right,
dropping it.
So it goes like that.
Yeah.
Probably it'll probably be fairly boring in the end because
we want to know.
We'll agree.
Yeah.
So The Shining.
Okay.
Paranormal.
Okay.
I'll say the Sixth Sense.
Nice.
All right.
I will say Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And
number one.
Oh, number. I was.
They were in random order.
Okay,
we'll take Shining at number one.
You know, I'm gonna say The Birds.
Oh, I like it.
Because you know that I love anybody who can sort of. I love the B movie concept done in an elevated way, and that's like the master of all of them. You know, for me, it's.
Well, you keep talking about the word grounded has come up a lot, and that's what that is. That's a B movie, but they take it in this is about a relationship, and it's about somebody's overbearing mother, and these are the events that happen in the background. You know, it's pretty cool.
Wow. And if my memory is correct, I love the fact that it's not. Unless it is on some kind of report, but it's not explained what's going on.
No.
Right?
And if made today, they would explain.
They would.
They would explain it.
Yeah.
Or if it was called Psycho.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shut up!
They would explain.
Still a
What's that last scene?
Oh, right. If there was Psycho.
Well, the birds were driven crazy, but we don't have any of that. That's what's so great about it.
That's great.
Know?
Yeah.
That's a good.
So no Texas Chainsaw. Do you remember? Did that fuck you up when you saw it? Did you see it later?
Yeah, it did. It did, and I do. I do. I think it's a great movie. I saw it. I only saw pieces of it as a kid, and I've seen it more recently than a lot of classics. I think it scared me so much the dirtiness, the grittiness. That it sort of kept me away. It sort of kept in that.
It's pretty unsafe.
It was unsafe.
It feels dangerous,
which is great.
It's got this weird aesthetic to it that it doesn't look like anything kind of before or after it. It looks like newsreel footage.
Right.
And
every time they clean it up, I get scared that like, oh no, they're going to restore it and it's not going to look the same. And it's just as powerful every time. Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Do you get, as a horror fan, do you get into, and because Halloween's right around the corner, do you get into the Halloween spirit? Is this a time of year that you celebrate? Because This guy's already got his decorations up.
Mine are going up this weekend. I'm pretty psyched.
What do you do for the holiday?
I actually don't.
Really? No costumes? Nothing?
Well, with KEY PEELE, we would do like costumes every day, like 2 or 3 costumes every day. So the last thing you want to do is like, when you get home, is put on a costume. So my past like 5 Halloweens have been me at home. Just hanging.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer route. You know, on Buffy, the monsters took a break.
Yeah.
Like they were like, you know what? It's our holiday. We're just going to kick back into the crypt and hang out. And Buffy was like, who do I slay? What's going on?
That's kind of my philosophy. It's like, hey, it's Halloween is every other day of the year for me. And another genre I realized I've sort of stepped out of, but there was a while I was getting into the Japanese Korean movies.
Oh yeah,
speaking my language now.
Yeah, and I love Suicide Club.
Yeah,
almost said Squad.
Yeah,
almost have it. That's one of my all-time favorites. Tale of Two Sisters.
Yep, great one
as well. Yeah. Absolutely gorgeous. But I
Rob
really
saw one this year.
the-
What's the Busan one?
Train to Busan.
Train to Busan is amazing.
It's
Do
awesome.
yourself a favor and check it out.
Yeah.
Because I was telling them on a previous podcast, you go into a movie. It's a zombie movie, zombies on a train. And you go in you kind of go in going, okay, what else you got? Like, what do you have that you're going to possibly show me in 2016 that I've never seen in zombie cinema or TV? And in the third act, I was like, you got that.
It's amazing.
It's really great.
It's absolutely amazing.
That's great.
That was a really great one. And then The Wailing we saw earlier this year. That's a little more avant-garde.
It's an art house, but it's intense and totally different. It's not like anything you've
recommend
seen.
The Piper, which I saw at Fantasia. I really liked.
Okay.
Yeah. It's unusual, but you'll like it, Rob, because it's got a lot of
I love the Korean
It
stuff.
goes like totally violent in the third act. You'll love
stuff
it.
is great.
Yeah.
And was Phone? Was that one?
That was. I've seen Phone.
That had the best.
I have not heard that title since I saw it. It's amazing.
That had the best performance from a young actor in any horror movie I've seen. Do you remember the little girl in that?
Yes.
I don't.
I don't either.
Yeah,
That was when
This was a Tartan
Asian.
Yeah, Tartan
Yeah.
Asian was dropping like
Right.
10 a month.
Oh yeah. I was all.
Yeah, that
I
kid was
all over
great. That kid was great.
She has a sequence in the last few moments of the movie where she does, essentially like a possession type thing, and she just acts it. She must be 4 or 5. She must be like 5, and she puts everything into this thing, and it. I remember, watching that. I said, nope, that is that scene alone is the best child acting I've seen in a horror movie.
I think I revisit it.
Looking up phone remake, right?
Look that up. And the witch, the child acting in The Witch was absolutely incredible too.
Oh yeah,
the
those
goat acting.
twins. Oh yeah, the goat acting
Good
was
Goat
crazy.
acting.
You're halfway there.
Greatest of all
My God.
time.
We interviewed the father and the mother from The Witch for the Blumhouse website, and the things that Black Phillip did. Like, apparently he was just like a dick on set. Like, that was just this horrible goat. Like, he gored people and was just like horrible to work
These
with.
goats today.
He was such a diva actor.
Speaking of comedy, the dad from that was from the British Office.
Right?
Yeah,
Vinci.
He's a great character. And in that, the Witch's voice just kind of resonates.
He is so scary.
It's one of
in The
those
Witch.
incredible voices.
Oh,
that-
yeah. He
and
has
I
an
didn't
amazing
remember him
voice.
from The Office. So
Yeah.
it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very
Well,
cool.
thank you so much
Yeah,
for
Yeah,
coming
thank
in.
you
rad.
so much
Appreciate
for
it.
joining
guys.
us.
Hey,
We got to
Anytime.
top 5, and we
Yeah.
talked
Got
to
Top 5. I'm gonna call
did
back
all right.
in. I'm gonna call in someday and be like, I have to change my top 5.
It's okay.
was too
We
boring.
change ours like every couple of months. If
I
you
gotta
ask
go more
me
obscure and
next
cool.
month.
You're gonna be walking out with several recommendation lists.
Hey,
probably.
Yes.
what's that on your shirt?
Hey! Visual
Flicker.
gag that won't work.
I will tell you
Yeah,
all.
Elric,
No, I
thank
will
you.
tell you. Last night I watched it, and it's the first time in a month where I've had tears running down my face. And of all the skits, that's the one that makes me laugh the most, and it's the most base and like totally, like
That's
throw
what
away.
does it a lot of the
I
time.
was crying.
Yeah.
And it had a Carrie reference.
And
there's-
there's
Yeah.
a Carrie reference.
Hard
Carrie
connection.
reference. Yeah,
Well,
there you
when Get Out hits theaters, we'll have you back on.
Yeah,
Get
and
into
tell us about
the
the
nitty
film.
gritty of
I
everything.
can tell you the nitty gritty, and I'm very excited.
We can't wait to see it.
It's cool. It's cool you made a horror movie.
That's cool.
So,
That's
thank you
cool.
very much. We appreciate it.
Thank
Well,
you
thank
so
you.
much.
Okay.
See you
next
guys
week.
next week.
All right, see you. Bye.